Good evening. I'm calling the Monday, November 17th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting to order. Will everyone please rise for Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you, everyone. All right, first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do I have any requests for changes tonight? Seeing none, entertain a motion to approve the agenda for the evening.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Do I have a second? All those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is approved. All right, we have minutes from, it's been a while, September 22nd, 2025. If anyone remembers back to that, do you have any concerns about the minutes or edits or? All right, entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor approve the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the minutes from 9:22 are approved. We have two public hearings this evening. The first is a code amendment shoreline ordinance 2025-02CA. This amendment to Chapter 11, Section 11.50 Shoreline Ordinance, a code amendment to repeal City Code Section 11.50 in its entirety and replace with a new City Code Section 11.50 to better align with the 2022 model shoreline ordinance of the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. Jeremy, will you be kicking this off for us?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, Commissioners. Patrick Sakura, our Water Resources Engineer, will be handling the presentation and be ready for any questions after.
Thank you. Good evening.
Everyone doing today? Very good. So my name is Patrick Sikora. I'm the Water Resources Engineer at the city. Lori Hack, who is our Water Resources Coordinator, who worked, was the main staff person who prepared the Shoreline Code amendment. She's under the weather today, so I'm subbing in for her. So bear with me as I, kind of go through the what we're proposing in terms of revising our Shoreline Code. So a little bit about our Shoreline Code. It is Section 11.50 of our city code under zoning. And you might be asking yourself, well, what is the shoreland? It's maybe something that you don't, it is part of our zoning, but it's maybe something we don't hear of every day. So shoreland is basically, we have 19 lakes, 1 river, and 4 creeks, which compose our city shoreland. And areas within 1,000 feet of a lake or 300 feet of one of the creeks or rivers is what we would consider our shoreland zone. With Eden Prairie, you might not think we have tons of lakes or shoreland resources, but it actually ends up being a pretty significant size of our city. We have almost nearly 50% of our city within the shoreland zones, which is a pretty fair amount. So it actually has some pretty, it comes up actually more often than you think when we look at, what folks want to do with, whether it's a single family home or in development. So what are the goals of the Shoreline Code amendment? The number one thing we want to do is we want to better comply with what the DNR and state rules are. So Shoreline Code does come from, there are statutes for a Shoreline Code, but the DNR also has a model ordinance. Our original code dates back to 1982, and we've had some revisions since in 1996 and 2004. But in 2022, they came out with a new model ordinance. So this is really just, and the DNR comes to communities, and so communities administer the Shoreline Code with guidance from the DNR. So the DNR kind of sets what the rules and expectations are for communities as they administer this code. And that model ordinance is intended to basically, be the model. We could approve that model ordinance, as, it is presented. But, when it comes to a community like Eden Prairie, where we've been developed for a while, that maybe isn't the best fit for us. So we, Lori and myself, and with other staff from planning, engineering, took a look and kind of wanted to kind of fine tune it so it essentially is codifying our existing practice. So we, as we see developments come through, work with homeowners, the goal is to really just have the new code reflect what our long-standing practices for shoreline code or for shoreline management have been. With the new model ordinance, there wasn't a lot of similarity between the format of our current shoreline code and what the, the model is. So we are actually going to repeal and replace the entire thing. There are many, rather than it would have gotten pretty convoluted to, have it say section A is now section F. I'm just kind of giving, broad examples. So it's just easier to use and it better aligns with the DNR to fully repeal and just replace it with this modified model ordinance. So the main changes, we worked extensively with the DNR on getting approval of what our kind of minor tweaks to the shoreline model ordinance were. One thing that's pretty informational, especially if you're a homeowner, you may not, maybe you're living next to Duck Lake or Mitchell Lake. You may not know what your ordinary high water level is. And it's not exactly the easiest thing to find. You may end up kind of going to the DNR's website. We'll add the ordinary high water levels. Those are the levels that really essentially kind of determine where, riparian resources are. So those for our lakes, where we have ordinary high water levels, that will be put into the code. With our older shoreline code, the classification for streams, they were classified as general waters. That classification is no longer pertinent. DNR has changed nomenclatures, so they'll be called either tributaries or transitions. So we wanted to make sure that the updated code aligned with that nomenclature. There's going to be some changes to water-oriented accessory structures. Our current shoreline code actually didn't align with the model ordinance. So our updated model or updated code will align with the model ordinance. We're going to add vegetation management plan requirements. When it comes to doing work shoreland is a pretty sensitive resource, whether it's a bluff or it's people working in close proximity to the water. We're going to have some requirements in there for getting a vegetation management plan, which is a permit you apply from, get from the city to do work and do modifications in there. And it kind of codifies what exactly that practice is. The biggest thing here is the impervious surface. We're refining our definition. Our current definition really there was some nebulous areas about what exactly was impervious versus pervious. So impervious surfaces, those are traditionally driveways, roofs, things like that, pools. Things like decks can get a little bit dicey. Some may have like underdecking or things like that. So we wanted to refine that definition to allow for a more consistent application of the shoreline code. We also wanted to create some flexibility, and this kind of goes along with codifying our existing practices. When we look at Eden Prairie, it was developed, as the shoreline code developed. So we have a lot of, you look at the mall, there's portions of the mall that are in the shoreline. These are areas that, whether it's commercial or industrial, they're pretty heavily, they're uses where you might expect a lot of impervious. So our current 30% resulted in a number of waivers and things like that. So we worked with the DNR and provided some good justification for moving towards something that we think will reduce the number of waivers, variances, and that would be a 30% impervious coverage for all rural or R1 zoned lot parcels, and then 70% in all other zones. And so with that, the requested action from staff is to approve the ordinance as drafted. Thank you.
Thank you. Any initial questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Commissioner Fart.
I have a few if you don't mind.
Sure, of course.
First of all, as a consumer of the city code, I really appreciate you guys adopting a common template language for, from city to city. Makes it easier for us to see the differences between city and city. The more they are the same, the better for us. So I have a couple of kind of user-oriented questions here. When you talked about the definition of shoreland there, I read it here in the notes, and it says 1,000 feet from ordinary high water level of lake, pond, or flowage. And so you have a nice tabulation a few pages later of all the lakes and a couple ponds in the city. Didn't read anything more about flowage, and it wasn't italicized, so it wasn't a defined term. So I looked in the definitions, other parts of the ordinance, and I saw a similar word called floodway, which isn't flowage, but it's close. And so I was just trying to figure out if there's a reason why flowage either wasn't defined or how close it is to a floodway, and if we should be concerned about that because it's not tabulated as a lake or pond.
Thanks, Commissioner Farr. That's a really good question. So flowage, so I guess just circle back, the goal behind this was to adopt the model ordinance. And so the definition of, like I said, we did make a few tweaks to the model ordinance. That definition comes straight from the DNR. So I actually looked and saw if there was a definition of flowage in the DNR model ordinance. There is not. That being said, when staff was working with the DNR to identify so as part of our process, we kind of took a broader look and said, are all shoreland resources accounted for? So that's one of the steps that we took with the DNR through the process of getting their blessing on this. They didn't identify anything beyond what we already have, in terms of, our current lakes, our rivers and streams. So in terms of flowage, it's going to be kind of this vestigial part. So I don't see in our actual day-to-day application it being, that pertinent to this. And that being said, I also don't see us getting any flowages. It's my understanding that they're kind of akin to a reservoir. I understand that there is some, similarity to the word floodplain. Floodplain only comes into the shoreland in some certain circumstances, usually around the streams and the river, because there's that 300-foot buffer around the ordinary high water of a stream or a river. Floodway or floodplain is the one area where you can extend beyond that. So if, like, let's say, usually you have a floodplain within that 300-foot buffer. If there's like a wide floodplain, like a wetland, that extends beyond that, the shoreline extends accordingly. So that's the definition there.
Okay, great, thank you. So then, as the words then relate to the graphics, later on in the document, you have a protected, what is it called? Protected land map. And that's what shows the shoreland boundary around all of the lakes, ponds, and potentially flowage. Do you know if there are any flowages that made the outline of the shoreland, or was it only lakes,
Floodplain.
ponds, and streams?
It's just, in terms of defining the shoreline, it is the floodplain, not the flowage.
Okay, all right, enough of that. Okay, thanks. Next question I have is about just the scoping of the section. And you probably know this by heart, I don't, but I want to say subdivision 7, general performance standards. It starts out by saying, all new riparian lots must meet the minimum lot area and width requirements, basically meet the performance standards. And so this new ordinance, or however we're tweaking it, applies to new lots, which to me is a platting process, which would be the trigger, as opposed to a redevelopment project on an existing parcel. If they go through redevelopment, they wouldn't necessarily be scoped to provide these performance standards. Is that correct?
That is correct. So if, let's say we had a development come in that was a riparian lot, so it already has one use on it, and we go through a city process to, get a different use, or, maybe there's just, additions or things like that trigger that city process, there wouldn't be a requirement for them to conform to that lot width, the minimum lot width. So like, we wouldn't require them to somehow obtain additional property to meet that. So they would essentially be grandfathered in, so it wouldn't apply.
Okay, I'll throw out the term existing non-conforming. It would just come in like that and be grandfathered or whatever.
Well, based on the way the ordinance is written, if the property was created before January 1st, 2026, the code allows that a lot to be the size that it is. And that only refers to the lot area and the lot width. Those are the standards in that section.
Yep.
So it wouldn't even necessarily be legal non-conforming, it would be conforming
Okay,
in that respect.
okay, that helps. Thank you. One last real easy one. There's another table further on down also in subdivision 7, E1D. Anyway, it talks about setbacks, additional structure setbacks. And so there's a top of bluff setback, a setback from a cemetery. Okay. And then And then setbacks to right-of-ways. Well, I think of the right-of-way as the other side of the property than the lake or pond or stream, right? This would be like the front yard versus the backyard. And as an architect, I go into the standard performance standard portion of the city code to find out what my front yard setback is, and that's where I expect to find this information. So this seems like a little hidden stumbling block for me because I would never think of going here to look for a front yard setback.
Sure, and you're absolutely correct in that usually when we look at shoreline code, we're administering it to the rear yard. You know, that's where the lake is in 99% of cases is going to be, or the river or creek. So you're correct that there is, and this again is, a portion of the DNR model ordinance that we are adopting. We do have different standards for setback from the right-of-way elsewhere in city code. For all but the town center and TOD zoning districts, it's actually more restrictive than what the shoreland is. So in 99% of cases, where applicants or users would be typically looking, they'll get the correct information. And with TOD or town center, where there is this kind of discrepancy, we would look to work with the developer and seeing where waivers may or variances may be applicable.
Okay, all right. And to the extent, maybe this is just a wish list or advice, but a lot of times in other codes, especially building codes, they'll have footnotes to tables which say that there could be changes to the published data in this chart in other pointed places to go look. And that would be maybe a helpful thing to add to the standard performance criteria for zoning districts. If you could add a footnote to say, hey, there's something going on in the Shortland District. So for what that's worth. Okay, thanks, I'm done. Appreciate it, Chair.
Thanks. Other questions, comments? I had one. So we're doing this to align with the DNR. Is there any places that were more restrictive than what the DNR requires?
That's a great question. There are actually areas where we are more restrictive than what the DNR requires. One of them is actually with some of those lot or setbacks from ordinary high waters and lot widths. We are more restrictive than that. We also are generally more restrictive in terms of how we apply the shoreline code. Typically, if you were to ask, the DNR, shoreline ends with where that buffer ends. So you could have a lot that is clipped, and only that part that is clipped would the impervious rule is really the big one there. That impervious rule would only apply to that portion that is clipped, not the entire parcel. But the longstanding practice in Eden Prairie has been that the entire parcel is actually, if you're clipped, the whole parcel is in the shoreland. So we are more restrictive in that regard, and that basically, we have some additional areas that would be outside the typical purview that where we're regulating, again, the main thing there is impervious. Another thing is with bluffs. We are actually more restrictive in terms of our bluffs. Bluffs are a very sensitive resource when it comes to erosion. So we want to make sure that we are taking some extra steps to protect bluffs within the city. So, this typical shoreland ordinance, you can have some structures within the structure setback. If that structure setback really only applies to the principal structure, ours would apply to all structures. There's also, we're more restrictive on what can be done in terms of clearing in a bluff or in a bluff impact zone. And we also look at bluffs. So if a bluff, there's a pretty extensive definition about what goes into a bluff, but part of it is it has to be in a portion of this bluff has to be in the shoreland. If you were to look at a DNR, staff person, where the bluff ends, they'd stay at the end of the shoreline zone. Even if the slope keeps continuing, outside the shoreline zone, we look at the top of the bluff. A portion of that bluff, kind of similar to our parcel rule with impervious. If a portion of that bluff is in the shoreland, the bluff continues up to the top. So, in those regards, we're more restrictive than the DNR.
And so in those instances, it's really been city practice though, so nothing's really changing. That
Correct.
So this aligns with what we've always done.
Yep. So that again, that aligns with codifying our existing practices.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, this is a public hearing. If anyone would like to come forward and speak for or against this amendment, please do so now. Not seeing anyone, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close the public hearing?
All right, do I have a second to close the public hearing?
I'll second that, Chair.
We have a second. All those in favor of close the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is closed. Does anyone want to have further discussion or comments on this, or would someone like to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, move to recommend approval for repealing and replacing the city code, section 11.50, as recommended by staff, represented in the November 17th, 2025 staff report.
All right, I have a motion for approval from Commissioner Kirk. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. You want to read? Oh, it is the same. Okay, never mind. Go ahead. I think Commissioner Taylor, did you second?
Yes.
All right, second. Any other further discussion or concerns? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Would anyone like to abstain? All right, thank you. Nice job tonight. All right, let's see, we have a second public hearing this evening. If I can paper over here. Code Amendment, Site Plan Review 2025-03CA, Amendment to Chapter 11, Section 11.47, Site Plan Review Ordinance. A code amendment to amend City Code Section 11.47, Subdivision 4, to prescribe a review process commensurate with the scale and scope of the project, aligning Eden Prairie with the practices in peer cities. Will you kick this one off, Jeremy, or will you be taking us through this one?
Yeah, I'll take this one. Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. This amendment primarily classifies or clarifies the review process for most of our projects, site plans, parking lot expansions, landscape changes. Not really any changes to the subdivision process, but we really wanted to try to make the process simpler for projects of a relatively simple scope. So the chart that's on your screen there, basically the changes that we're recommending are in green, which is where the ordinance would change, facade changes that are conforming would be reviewed and approved by staff. If they don't conform, then obviously we're looking at a waiver, and then the planning commission, the council would weigh in on those. Same thing with conforming parking lot and landscaping requirements or changes. Again, conforming, we can approve those from a staff perspective as an administrative process. What that means, that administrative process is not me in a back room checking off, making sure everything's approved. We have a site plan review committee, basically, or development review committee that meets weekly, and we review projects to make sure that they conform to all aspects of our code. And that committee includes engineers, planners, fire department, personnel, landscaping folks, all reviewing a project to make sure that it meets their code. A notable change based on this ordinance is the conforming building expansions. Currently, the code allows up to 10% or 2,000 square feet can be reviewed by the city council only from a building expansion. What we're proposing is the city staff can review building expansions up to 10% of the gross floor area. The city council would only review, or the city council only, not you folks as the planning commission, but the city council would review expansions that are between 10 and 50% of the gross floor area of a given building. And then obviously the full review for an expansion or a building addition would be reviewed by the planning commission and city council. That's the middle green bar there in your screen there. And then obviously building demolitions is the opposite of a building expansion. So when you start tearing down portions of the building, city staff can review up to 10% of those demolitions. And anything greater than that would be reviewed by the city council. Now, of course, usually from a development demolition perspective, those are part of a larger plan. Last year, I think about this time, we reviewed Planet Fitness project that tore down half of an Office Depot or Office Max, I always forget which one, tore down half of that and replaced it with some other projects within the building, a Starbucks at the time. So obviously you would see the whole thing as kind of a larger project, but if that project just came in as its own, tore down half that building, staff could potentially approve that depending on the size. This also, I want to point out from a building demolition standpoint, this only applies to those projects that we received site plan approval. So buildings, single-family homes don't need site plan approval, you can tear those down without this full process. Also, if a building is deemed unsafe from a building code or fire code perspective, obviously the ordinance would allow those to be demolished immediately because of those are life safety issues. Coming back to the conforming building expansions, you may ask yourself kind of what other projects have we kind of reviewed more recently? Couple years ago, there was a project on Wallace Road where the facade changed, conforming. It went through the planning commission, the city council process, I believe. That would just be approved administratively because that was a conforming. They changed class 1 material from one type of class 1 material to another type of class 1 material, excuse me. And so staff could approve those moving forward. Holiday Inn Express a couple years ago, they added a pool. That was about 4% of the gross floor area. That went through the full planning commission and the full city council process. City staff could approve that type of change. Both of these projects did not trigger any waivers. I want to highlight. Any waivers obviously would go through the full process. This does not give staff approval to waive certain requirements. I think that's it in a nutshell. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but basically what we're trying to do is posture ourselves such that we're supportive of the business community that wants to reinvest in the property, in their properties, and not kind of add undue red tape and process to what value. So that's kind of our goal here, is to kind of help things along a little bit. Stand for any questions.
Thank you, Jeremy. Questions? Commissioner Kirk?
Jeremy, so a public hearing only comes into play for the full review, for the,
We're not proposing to take away any necessarily public hearings. If it's going to be reviewed by the stat or by the city council, there would be a public hearing at the city council level.
so they would call for a public hearing at the point in
Yes.
time? Okay.
So our full review, just so you know, the full review includes 2 public hearings. There's one at the planning commission and one at the city council level. When it skips the planning commission, it basically takes a month off that review process. The council still has a public hearing
Okay.
unless they've changed the code. But right now, we're proposing a public hearing there. There's not a public hearing, of course, for any
More of an
city staff.
More of an internal review for the,
Yeah.
yep. Okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Farr?
Yep. So 2 things. First of all, I've gone through the development review process in a lot of cities before, and that's a great process to simplify this, and I appreciate the red tape reduction for applicants, and so this is all thumbs up to me. And just for the record, I know that you guys do a great job, all cities do, of documenting the results of the DRC findings so that that can be, if not public record, it could be made available later if someone questions the whole backdoor decision-making process that you alluded to. It's not backdoor at all, in fact. And so the findings that happen in that session, I think, are valuable for anybody to go back and nod their head to and say, yep, they checked all the boxes.
Yeah, often we will add comments or provide feedback to the
Yeah,
applicant. based on
yep,
this.
yep. So thank you for doing that in a lot of cities too. Regarding the conforming building expansions, that green bar in the middle of your chart there, again, as compared to then the second thing that you talked about, building demolition, I'm an advocate of keeping things as simple as possible, and it just seems like the 3 different pathways between the 10% and then 10 to 50% and then over 50% seems like an overkill and adds a little more complication to it than it actually needs to be. So I would have a tendency to suggest that maybe there's 2 different choices of a conforming building expansion. If 10% is what you want to do administratively, fine. And then either let the city council take care of everything greater than 10% or include the planning commission in everything greater than 10%. Either way would be fine by me, but it's just like 3 different categories of a building expansion just seems like an overkill.
Sure.
My 2 cents, or whatever. No pennies anymore, so. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right, this is a public hearing. If anyone would like to come forward and speak for or against this amendment, please do so now. Not seeing anyone. Entertaining motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
All right. Do I have a second to close public hearing?
I'll second that.
Yes, second to close. All those in favor of closing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing's closed. Further discussion? Seems like good changes. I think.
It looked like it'll help expedite some of the projects that comes up as well.
All right.
Good changes.
Would anyone like to make a motion then?
Mr. Commissioner, I'll make a motion. A motion to move to recommend approval for revisions to City Code Section 11.47, Subdivision 4, as recommended by staff, represented in the November 17th, 2025 staff report.
All right, I have a motion for approval from Commissioner Taylor. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second from Commissioner Grote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Would anyone like to abstain? All right. Thank you, everyone, for the nice presentations this evening and those changes. Do we have any planners' reports, Jeremy?
No, just that you should expect that there will be a meeting on December 8th, which will be our last one of the year.
Okay. December 8th, all right. And then do we have any members' reports? Anyone like to make a motion to close public hearing?
Motion to close
Or
the
close
hearing.
the meeting, sorry, close the meeting. Let's close it out.
Motion to close the meeting.
All right, do I have a second to close the meeting?
Second.
All right, all those in favor of closing or adjourning the meeting, say aye.
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 Opposed, all right, we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone. See you December 8th. Losing it.